The Sherlock superpower. The person sitting next to you has a secret, and their phone is broadcasting it to anyone who knows the language. This isn't a superpower, but a powerful method of thinking that decodes the clues hidden in our modern world. Today, we are learning that language. Unlocking observation mode. Let's talk about focus. Most people walk through life with their senses on a blurry, low power setting, but what if you could access the controls? What if you could switch your mind to high definition focus on command and see the world as it truly is? What is the single most important mental shift someone needs to make to start seeing the world like a detective? The mental shift is from passive seeing to active observing. Passive seeing is just letting light enter your eyes. Active observing is a three-step process. First, you identify an object. Second, you note its specific qualities. Third, you ask what those qualities imply. How does our modern world, with its constant digital distractions, hinder our natural powers of observation? The modern world floods us with information, creating a state of continuous partial attention. To combat this, you must practice mental triage. Consciously decide which information streams are irrelevant, like most social media feeds, and intentionally block them out. This preserves your focus for what truly matters. What is the concept of targeted ignorance that Holmes practiced, and why is it crucial today? Targeted ignorance is the strategic decision to ignore irrelevant information to improve focus on what is relevant. For example, when solving a problem, you must ignore the office gossip and the news alerts. This isn't about being uninformed. It's about being selectively informed. What is a simple, daily exercise to begin sharpening one's observational skills? Pick up your house key. You see metal, but I want you to see the story. Note the specific scratches on the shaft, which indicate how you hold it, and the subtle warping on the teeth, which speaks to the age of the lock it enters. The goal is to move beyond simple identification and begin documenting the history of an object through its physical wear. Reading the silent stories. Now that we're looking at the world differently, let's discuss what we're looking for. Every object in your life, from a coffee cup to a car key, is telling a story about you. These are the silent stories that broadcast the truth to anyone who knows how to listen. How can we train our senses beyond just sight to pick up on clues? To train your senses, you must give them specific tasks. For example, when you drink coffee, don't just taste coffee. Try to identify specific notes. Is it nutty? Is it fruity? Is it burnt? This active interrogation of your senses forces your brain to build a more detailed internal model of the world. You mentioned analyzing details like a worn-out shoe or a coffee stain. What kind of stories do these objects tell? Look at a person's shoes. Are they expensive but poorly maintained? This suggests the person values status but lacks discipline. Are they practical, worn-out work boots? This tells a story of a life of physical labor, and the specific where patterns can even suggest their gait or a past injury. What is multi-channel analysis, and how can we practice it in a normal conversation? Multi-channel analysis means you listen to three things at once: the words, the tone of voice, and the body language. The key is to look for contradictions. If someone says, "I'm confident," in a shaky voice while fidgeting, you have just detected a critical piece of data. Can this intense focus on details become overwhelming in daily life? You avoid being overwhelmed by learning to distinguish between signal and noise. A signal is a detail that is unusual or out of place within a given context. A trained mind learns to scan a room and almost instantly flag the one or two details that don't fit the established pattern. How do you differentiate a meaningful clue from a random, irrelevant detail? A clue becomes a signal when it contradicts the context. A wet umbrella in a stand on a rainy day is noise. A wet umbrella in the same stand on a perfectly sunny day is a powerful signal that requires an explanation. Building the logic bridge. So, you have observed the critical details, but these are just dots on a map. Deduction is the logical process of drawing the lines between them to reveal the hidden picture. What is the core difference between deduction and simple guessing? Guessing is forming an opinion without data. Deduction is the process of forming a conclusion that is necessitated by the data. If I see wet streets, I might guess it rained. If I see wet streets and a man holding a dripping umbrella, I could deduce it rained. How does one build a chain of deduction from a single observation? You build a deduction chain by taking one verifiable fact and asking, what is the most probable cause or consequence of this? That gives you your second point. Then, you treat that second point as a new fact and repeat the process, creating a sequence where each link is the most probable consequence of the one before it. Can you give a modern example of a deduction chain? A person's laptop has a sticker for a privacy-focused browser. Their profile picture is a landscape with no people, and they use a complex, randomly generated password for the guest Wi-Fi. The deduction. They're technically proficient, value their privacy intensely, and likely work with sensitive information. This isn't a guess. It's a profile built from evidence. What role do hypotheses play in the deductive process? A hypothesis is a preliminary explanation that you must then try to disprove. For example, if you see a car speeding, your initial hypothesis might be that the driver is reckless. You would then test that by looking for other data. Are they also on the phone? Or are they rushing a passenger to the hospital? What is the biggest mistake people make when trying to form logical deductions? The biggest mistake is treating a deduction as a certainty. A deduction is only as strong as the data it's based on, and it always represents the most probable conclusion, not the only possible one. The master detective knows that every theory is provisional until proven by overwhelming evidence. How does one practice counterfactual thinking to strengthen a hypothesis? To strengthen a hypothesis, you must actively search for evidence that would disprove it. If you believe a suspect is lying, your job is not to find evidence of their lies. Your job is to search for any evidence that they might be telling the truth, and only if you find none can you trust your initial conclusion. Decoding the human puzzle. We have discussed objects and logic, but the most fascinating puzzles are human beings. The art of decoding the human puzzle is about understanding the information people give you before they even speak. How can understanding basic human psychology turn you into a better observer of people? Psychology provides the fundamental principles of human behavior. For example, understanding the principle of cognitive dissonance, the discomfort people feel when their actions contradict their beliefs, allows you to predict how they will rationalize their own bad behavior. It's about understanding the why behind the what. What are microexpressions, and why are they the ultimate lie detectors? A microexpression is an involuntary facial expression that lasts for a fraction of a second, revealing a person's true emotion. For example, a fleeting, one-sided smile, a smirk, is the universal sign of contempt. It tells you the person feels superior to you, no matter how politely they are speaking. Can you walk us through one of the 7 universal microexpressions, like contempt or fear? Let's take surprise. When a person is genuinely surprised, Their eyebrows will curve and raise, their eyes will widen, and their jaw will drop slightly, all within about half a second. If any of these elements are missing, or if the expression lasts too long, it is almost certainly a performance. Beyond facial expressions, what does body language tell us about a person's true feelings? The most honest part of the human body is often the feet. When a person is engaged and interested in a conversation, their feet will typically point towards the person they are speaking with. If their feet are angled away towards an exit, their body is telling you they want to leave the conversation, even if their words are polite. How can someone start practicing the skill of reading microexpressions? To practice reading microexpressions, watch a recording of a press conference and focus on the moments after a tough question is asked. Use your remote to play it back at one-quarter speed. You will begin to see the fleeting expressions that flash across the speaker's face before they're practiced. Media-trained expression takes over. Is there a risk of misinterpreting these expressions? Misinterpreting an expression is a failure of contextual analysis. A man in a job interview might show a flash of fear. It could mean he's lying about his qualifications, or it could simply mean he is terrified of public speaking. The digital crime scene. We now enter the world of the digital crime scene, where every action leaves a permanent trace. A forgotten password or a deleted file is the modern equivalent of a footprint at the scene of a crime. For a detective, this is a golden age of information. How would Sherlock Holmes use a tool like social media to solve a case? A person's social media profile is a curated story, but the truth is in the uncurated data. They might post about their love for hiking, but the health app on their phone, which syncs to a public fitness network, shows an average of only 500 steps a day. The data reveals the gap between their aspirational self and their actual self. What digital breadcrumbs do we leave behind every day? Digital breadcrumbs are the log files of our lives. For example, the Wi-Fi network your phone automatically connects to in the morning tells a story about where you spent the night. This data, when cross-referenced with other data, creates a detailed and verifiable timeline of your actions. Can you give an example of a digital deduction in an everyday office scenario? To uncover a secret office romance, you could analyze the building's key card access logs. If you notice that two employees who work in different departments consistently enter and exit the same secure floor within minutes of each other after hours, you have found a strong correlation that demands an explanation. How has the concept of a clue changed from a physical object to a piece of data? A muddy footprint tells you that someone was there. A server log tells you who they were when they were there, what machine they used, how long they stayed, and what they looked at. The level of detail in digital evidence is orders of magnitude greater than its analog predecessor. With AI and deep fakes, is it becoming harder to trust digital evidence? The challenge of AI and deep fakes is real, but it is not insurmountable. For every new method of digital forgery, a new forensic technique is developed to detect it, often by analyzing the subtle mathematical artifacts that the forgery process leaves behind. It is a high-tech cat-and-mouse game. The Grandmaster's Playbook. Now we reach the final level, where deduction becomes more than just a tool for analysis. This is the Grandmaster's Playbook, where you learn not just to solve the puzzle, but to shape it. This is where analysis becomes influence. What does it mean to think in networks? Thinking in networks means you stop seeing people as isolated individuals and start seeing them as nodes in a system. You then analyze the flow of information and influence between those nodes. The key to understanding why an individual acted a certain way often lies in the behavior of the network around them. Can you explain the concept of anticipative deduction? Anticipative deduction is using data to build a predictive model of a person's behavior. If you know from observation that a person is highly risk averse and always chooses the safest option, you can reliably predict how they will react in a future high stakes situation. It is about using past data to forecast future actions. What is situational chess? Situational chess is the art of structuring a conversation to get the information you need. For example, instead of asking, "Were you at the party?" you might say, "I heard the music at the party was terrible." A person who was there will feel compelled to correct you, thus confirming their attendance without you ever having asked. How can disguise be used as a tool for gathering information in a modern context? Modern disguise is about creating a plausible digital identity. To gain information from a specialized online group, you would need to create a profile with a credible history, appropriate technical jargon, and a network of connections that validates your persona. It is a form of digital method acting. How does one practice these advanced skills without becoming manipulative? The ethical line is simple. Influence is presenting information in a way that respects a person's ability to make their own decision. Manipulation is using their known psychological weaknesses against them to remove their ability to make a rational decision. One is a debate, the other is an exploit. Living in high definition. Finally, we must ask why anyone should learn these skills. This is not about becoming a detective. It is about choosing to live in high definition. What is the ultimate benefit of cultivating a detective mindset? The ultimate benefit of this mindset is achieving cognitive autonomy. It is the ability to recognize and override your own built-in biases, the mental shortcuts that lead to so many errors in judgment. It is about thinking for yourself, clearly and precisely. How can these techniques improve our personal and professional relationships? These techniques improve relationships by forcing you to replace your assumptions with observations. Instead of guessing what someone feels or thinks, you learn to observe their actual words, tone, and body language. This practice eliminates countless misunderstandings before they start. If you could give our audience one final piece of advice, what would it be? The most important habit to build is this. For any important belief you hold, actively search for disconfirming evidence. Don't ask, "How am I right?" Ask, "How might I be wrong?" This single, difficult practice is the fastest way to upgrade your thinking.